Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for coming this evening, or this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Katharine Halls, and it's a real pleasure to be hosting this panel on Arabic literature in Berlin. First of all, thank you very much, Savad and Masha, for putting this together. It's an amazing program. And I really hope people will also be attending the other panels because they look amazing. Before we get started on introducing the guests and speaking to them, I'd just like to let people know that tonight's panel is in association with Khan al-Janoub bookstore in Berlin. They're a wonderful resource. They get Arabic books from across the Middle East and they deliver everywhere in Europe, possibly the world, I'm not sure. Anyway, they're a wonderful resource if you struggle to get Arabic books. And they have very kindly given attendees of BILA HUDOOD discount for the duration of the festival. So with the code BILA HUDOOD 2021, you can get €5 off orders of €50 or more. I think Masha will put that in the chat, and their website is khanaljanoob.com. So please do go and look up the works, especially by the panelists at tonight's panel and the rest of the festival. They stock lots of them. So I hope your curiosity will be piqued and you'll go and buy some of those books. Okay, as I said, my name is Katharine Halls. I'm a translator of Arabic literature into English. I live in Berlin, and I'm really delighted to be joined tonight by three writers and or translators who also live in Berlin. First of all, Liwaa Yazji is a filmmaker, playwright, scriptwriter and poet. Her play Goats was performed at the Royal Court Theatre and published in English in 2017. Her play Q&Q was a part of the Birth Debate project in Manchester, along with Waiting for the Guests, which was published in Index for Censorship. Liwaa was also awarded the prestigious Berlin Senate stipend for non-German literature for her upcoming project Trash. And she's joining us this evening from Damascus, but hopefully coming back to Berlin soon. Hi, Liwaa. Writer Haytham El-Wardany was born in Giza in Egypt, and he's lived in Berlin for 20 years. His first short story collection, The Unfinished Literature Club, received the 2003 Sawiris Award, and Waking Dream won the Cairo International Book Fair's 2012 prize for Best Short Story Collection. His experimental prose work, The Book of Sleep, has just been translated into English by Robin Mojer, and that appeared last year from Seagull Books. And he also recently received the Berlin Senate stipend for non-German literature. Hi, Haytham.
Hi.
Sandra Hetzl is a literary translator, researcher, writer, and project curator with a focus on contemporary Arabic literature. She's translated short stories, poems, and non-fiction by Rasha Abbas, Kadhim Khanjar, Arif Hamza, Bush al-Maktari, Aboud Saeed, Asaf al-Asaf, Naif Badawi. She's translated over 20 theatre plays, including by Mohammed Al-Attar, Maya Zbib, Su'a Theatre Company, Wa'il Qudur, Huda Barakat, and Mudal Al-Haggi. She's the founder of the 1011 Collective for Contemporary Arabic Literature and the Mini Literature Festival downtown Spandau, Medina. She lives in Berlin. Hi, Sandra.
Hello.
Although right across the other side of Berlin from me. I thought we could get started in a very traditional manner by starting with the person who's been here the longest, our oldest Berliner, Haytham. So I'd like to begin by asking you how you ended up in Berlin, what it's been like being a writer here over the last 20 years, and how things have changed over that time.
Yeah, Yani, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm really very delighted to be part of the panel tonight. Well, actually, love brought me to this city, this was like end of 90s when I started, like coming to Berlin, and of course it was another Berlin compared to today.
Much cheaper, I keep being told.
Yeah, much cheaper and much less gentrified and more decentralized, I would say also. And yeah, how was it to be a writer in Berlin back at that time? I guess, when I started reading in German, I was less interested in the literary scene or the literature which was written back at that time, you know, like there was so-called pop literature at that time, you know, like, and I was less interested in this. I was rather more interested, you know, like to read, I don't know, like Robert Walser or, you know, like Rilke, or really classical things. So I wasn't really in touch with literary scene. I was rather more in touch with other kind of scenes, you know, like people who were working with sound, or who were working with video or doing films or image, etc. And yeah, like as I said, there was something very powerful back then there, because it was very decentralized. I mean, that was the time before the term contemporary art wasn't, you know, like very much used, or I don't know if coined. Maybe, yeah, it was coined. But, you know, like the mode of production was really very independent, and you would meet many different groups who are working in or on different projects with different, you know, like perspectives. You would meet people who would have different forms of life, you know, and yeah, this changed radically since then. Mm.
Thanks. Sandra, I think you must be our second oldest Berliner here. So tell us how you ended up in Berlin, and if it had anything to do with your career as a translator.
Oh, yeah, no, it had nothing to do with my career as a translator. I came in 2003, so I'm, I think, 3 years younger than Haytham in terms of being a Berliner. And when I moved to Berlin, I moved from Naples a bit, and I was studying art. So I did art school in Berlin. I moved there for some friends who were living there and for art school, and also because it was Berlin then. It was the cheap place where everything was happening. And only later, only like 3 years later, I started to learn Arabic. But probably I wouldn't, if my choice would have brought me elsewhere, if I would have stayed in Naples, for instance, or I don't know. I don't know if I would have learned Arabic or chosen to learn Arabic if I wouldn't have stayed in Berlin.
So it's not completely unconnected then.
It's not completely unconnected, maybe.
And if I'm not mistaken, you translate quite a few writers who live in the city. So
yeah, but that's because sometimes they, like most of them, came here after I started translating them, and some even because.
wow, well, it doesn't surprise me that you should be a major draw for people in Berlin. Liwaa, you came to Berlin when you were already quite an established writer. How has it been? How was the move here, and how have you found it, you know, continuing your writing career here?
Yeah, I moved in 2016. I've been to the city before, like in 2004, 7. I stayed also in 2007 for a while, but then I moved in 2016. And I actually came to Berlin to work on a writing project, which is called Haytham. It's a TV series that I wanted to do on the Temple of Haytham. And back then it was such an interesting experience.
Can you explain for people what that is?
Yeah, it's a former airport that is not in use, and that was used to kind of park the Syrian refugees until somebody knows what to do with them. Not only Syrians, actually, there was like Afghani, Iraqi, Kurdi, I mean, from different nationalities, from different continents. So it was for me such a huge, important for me and for my co-writer, Mohammed Abu Laban. So it was such an interesting thing for us to work with. I mean, this kind of modern Tower of Babel. I mean, it's really, I mean, the idea of language and the misunderstandings and what's going on there, and how it is kind of cut off from the real world because we're not allowed to get in. I mean, even in press conference, you sneak in, but you're not allowed to talk to people over there. So this experience was so intriguing for us. And we came to pursue working on this project, which didn't stop until now. I mean, we're still working, we're applying for stuff. So it's, the project is coming coming to see the light. I mean, sometime maybe in the future, but I mean, that was the main reason, because also I moved to, after Damascus, I moved to Beirut also to work on something. So for me, kind of the city is inviting me in a way. And what is interesting is that kind of the tides of the Syrian people moving from one city to the other also kind of, in a way, invited me to come to Berlin, because that's the content of what I'm working on. So I mean, first Beirut, and then as a second choice was Berlin. So I just kind of followed the inspiration. Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's definitely been my impression that there's been a real growth of Arabic writing taking place in Berlin. And I think one of the signs of that has been also the growth of a certain kind of infrastructure to support writers. And I'm interested to ask you about this, Sandra, because you were on the jury this year of the Berlin Senate stipend, the work stipend for non-German literature, which both Liwaa and Haytham received. It's very prestigious and it's relatively new. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit behind the scenes what it was like being on the jury for that, and whether you think, you know, this really is a sign that Arabic literature is flourishing in Berlin.
Yeah, so this stipend exists since 2018, the stipend for non-German literature. And yeah, I mean, it's, as you say, really prestigious. I think it's a really good thing for a writer to get it, you know, you have really 1 year time to work on a project. Well, so this year was, as far as I could understand, the first year, last year, 2020, because the stipend is 2021, but I was in the jury 2020. So it was the first time that they got somebody who actually reads Arab as one of the 7 jury members, and they choose this according to how many applicants are there in a language. So this time there were so many Arab-speaking applicants. It was like the total was 255, and there were 25 Arab applicants. So they were kind of forced, which I think is really good, because the languages
Absolutely.
that are not represented in the jury might have a hard way sometimes, because then the jury completely relies on how do you say, on
external.
What do you call it?
External consultants or external jury members.
External, yeah, exactly. An external translator who gets commissioned to write like less than half a page about the application. So based on that, you have to make a decision. While when you have somebody in the jury, you can choose, and yeah. So it was. I was quite happy to do that. It was lots of work, because I think I read like 1,000 pages. Yeah.
And how was it? Was it good stuff? Do you feel like, you know, there was a difficult decision to make and a high quality of entries? Yeah. So I did, of course, the 25 Arab applications, and I also added, because everybody of us had to do 37, so I also added English, and in both languages there was quite interesting stuff, and there was quite interesting stuff that didn't get the stipend, of course, you know, as it happens. That's a great sign, though, because hopefully these people will keep applying and will apply to other things going on in the city. Hope.
Yeah, and what I found interesting also as a thought is that sometimes, you know, when you are a creative person, when you are an artist or a writer, you think of concurrence, of not concurrence, how do you call it in English? Competition. You think of competition or of big numbers of competitors. You are kind of course, it's something that can scare you. But in that sense, it's absolutely like the number of applicants was actually in favor of, I think, a good choice or a balanced choice, because it forced the award to get somebody who speaks Arab.
Yeah, and it's creating
I think
momentum.
This year is the same again. I'm not in the jury, but I think it's the same.
That's really exciting news. Liwaa, so you received the stipend in the first year that it was created, which I think is also amazing, both in what it says about your work, but also in what it says about the amount of writing that's taken place in Berlin. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did with that, you know, with that year that you had? paid for by the stipend, and how useful it was to you, and also whether there's been any other kind of support that you've experienced here in Berlin as a writer.
Okay, so I get the stipend I applied for it just before I went to London for the Royal Court for the play, and I was really working hard, and I don't know how I disconnected. I wanted to apply before I go to London because I kind of wanted to close one project and hold again to another project. I was so enthusiastic, but I didn't think that I will take it. Actually, I worked a lot, but I thought, who knows? I mean, I just knew about it. I don't know if because like they told me there were like 600 applicants at that time, So in a way, when I'm back from London after the play, when I just went back to Berlin, and in a way, I just called it, that's my landing to Berlin, because when I arrived in 2016, I was so occupied with the play in the Royal Court. So I kind of stayed in Berlin in kind of yes, I'm living here, but I'm all oriented to another country, and I'm working with another country. So I'm dividing my time. I'm traveling with the play, with the film. So I wasn't in a way living in the city or experiencing the city. So the moment I kind of landed back in 2018, I got the news that I get the stipend, and I just felt
quite a nice welcome.
Okay, so it kind of gave me a push to first relate to the city. I mean, to kind of a very prestigious and generous welcome to the city, let's say, first. And then it was kind of a sign and support this, this is what I'm doing. I'm working on my next project, and I'm working on it in Berlin, because there's always the question, am I going right? And I mean, because it's so uneasy in a way to kind of feel that you can travel everywhere and you have to choose where to live next because you don't have a homeland in a way. So, I mean, if you got a visa and if you got the resources, the money, but I mean, the idea of where to go to, I mean, of course, I'm coming to work on my project, Haytham, but still for me, it's kind of a question about, am I living here? Am I going to live here? I'm just going here, arriving to Berlin to work on this Haytham project and go back somewhere. I don't know. I'm very and I'm in a very luxurious situation because I had a visa, I know, but still the questions about the existence in the city kind of being answered by having this this stipend. And funnily, I got pregnant in that year. So in a way, I felt like, okay, so I've got the money to work on my project and to have the baby. So it was kind of a package that the city gave to me. And it was a remarkable night when we had to do the readings, like the public readings. There was kind of an invitation, and I was in a bed rest and I was supposed to lay in bed. So, I mean, they were so generous with me. They gave me kind of a chaise-longue in the reading because I couldn't, sit for a long time. So, yeah.
I'm really sorry we couldn't provide one of those for the festival this weekend.
Yeah, but it was so kind of family feeling, because I was in this reading time and I had this kind of like laying down situation, reading from my book. So it was such a really a warm welcome into the city in a very family atmosphere. Yes, I worked. Wonderful. Yeah, I worked on the ideas, and I continued research because the thing that I was working on, trash, needed a lot of research, and actually I used the whole time in more about research about the concepts that I wanted to. I mean, no more about historical stuff.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Trash and what that project's about?
Yeah, the project is about a love story. It's in Aleppo during the war, while Aleppo in 2015 was under siege.
Is this a play, Liwaa? What's the genre?
No, it's a prose. So I wouldn't say it's. I mean, it's a prose. Let's say it's a prose. It's a novel, and then this love story is between a man who collects trash, who decided to collect trash in the city because otherwise the city would die out of trash, and a love story with a headmaster, a school headmaster. So it tells a lot about the idea of trash, of Syria being the trash bin of human concepts first, and then of of people you don't want in your countries. I mean, in Europe, in UK, whatever. So you just, if you don't want those jihadis or fanatic people, just throw them into Syria. And then in a way, there was a kind of research about trash and how countries get rid of their trash. And I read a lot about, for example, the pig issue in Egypt, how they really slaughtered lots of pigs in Egypt in certain times, how they in Tunisia. So I kind of opened to the whole idea of recycling trash. At the same time dealing, I mean, with the hallucinations of this trash man who decided in a way to be like the Don Quixote of the little city and to clean, I mean, while everything being dropped from over the city, I mean, everything literally was dropping over the city while he decided like to work on a very micro scale and started to collect. And he had this little love story that he followed, and that's he wanted, I mean, to show love by taking the trash and to understand the people who stayed in the city by seeing what they are throwing away. The poorer they come, the less trash they can afford sending. So in a way, kind of a study and analysis of trash and love at the same time. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds amazing. We look forward to seeing it when it's
Yeah.
ready. Haytham, so you also got the stipend, which is fantastic this year. So it would be wonderful to hear what you're planning to do with that. But I'm also interested in asking you, because you were here for a very long time before that was even established. And I know that you've been involved in other initiatives to create support for writers in Berlin. So it'd be nice if you could tell us both ways in which you feel like you've had support as a writer, but also how you've been involved in ways of supporting other writers in the city.
Yes. So, like the situation or the cultural landscape, let's say, in Berlin changed drastically in the last, let's say, 7 years or something. It was the time when, like many cultural workers, like artists or writers or scholars or journalists or activists, etc., from the Middle East, like they moved to Berlin, no? And of course, it's like it's not by chance, no? Like it's because what happens and the fate of social protests and revolutions, which kind of led to this movement. And so yes, so since then, like there is a very visible presence of like like works or people who are working with culture from the Arabic region, and of course, like they kind of followed somehow what happened after 2009, for instance, in Iran, no? Like there was also another wave which moved to Berlin, or they are followed by another wave which came from Turkey, like after the coup, the failed coup, and like so there is like permanent kind of waves which is coming to the city, and yes, and of course like people when they arrive, they're very much busy with like everyday life, to finish their papers, to start to learn the language, maybe like all of these things, but also to like most of the people, they come with a very dramatic or a very traumatic experience, and they need like to settle down to figure out what like what they have been through. So I was involved in 2 writing workshops with mostly with people who moved, like freshly to the city, like writers, but also people who are using writing in their praxis, or filmmakers, etc. And it was you know, like supported by AFAQ and Archive Cabinet. And there we kind of tried to because, you know, one of the things which immediately happened is, you know, like this representation trap, you know, so many of the cultural workers, they would be invited into events or things here in Berlin, and it's kind of expected that they would, you know, like represent you know, represent the pain, represent the failed revolution, represent the war, represent whatever, you know, like represent themselves, etc. And so like one of the things which we tried somehow to think about, or to, you know, like work on, you know, like how to escape from this representation trap, kind of, you know, like how not to play this game, or how to, you know, like how to not to do what is expected somehow, rather to focus on what is really needed to be done, or what is needed to be written, etc. And the other thing which we try to collectively to think about is what does it actually mean to write disastrous event or catastrophic event, you know, like what are the different modes of writing which is there, and whether or not it's helpful to write it down, because sometimes maybe it's better to, you know, like to let it sleep for a bit, and then to anyways, so yani, these were, you know, like kind of workshops which is trying to deal a little bit with the situation and what kind of complications which the situation bring with, you know. Also, we, like, I'm involved in different conversation, and, you know, like thinking about something like a space, you know, like to initiate something like a space, or we didn't come up yet with anything concrete, but there is a kind of feeling that, you know, like the scene, the landscape is really very rich and very, you know, like diverse. Yet there is less a kind of discourse, right? Like there is, you know, like there is, so to speak, you know, like many individuals, or, you know, like islands, but there is less kind of certain discourse, I would call it, you know. And we were kind of, with different people were thinking about, you know, like how to activate all of this potentiality, and how to, you know, like, and of course, like the classical places to develop a discourse is a space, maybe, or a magazine, or, you know, like stuff like that. And but also, you know, like thinking about, you know, like community, and what does actually community mean, because you know, like many people are less interested in a sense of community which is based on a kind of identity, you know, like some kind of Arabness as the core of community. Rather, you know, like there are many attempts to engage with history of migration in the city, and to engage with opening up to different communities, and you know, like human and non-human communities as well.
Foxes and squirrels, Berlin's many
for instance.
creatures.
But also, you know, like ecological projects, and, you know, like and of course, like today we are in a kind of in a better situation, because, you know, like we have places like Khan el-Janoub, as you mentioned, but we have also hopscotch, and I don't know, like archive cabinets, Havi, etc., like places with,
Bainatna, Bulbul.
exactly, like, but still there are many things yet to be done somehow. And like this sounds really like ages ago, because this is like pre-corona, like, and cultural workers, they are really hit deeply, like, or badly with the COVID, and so many things postponed or canceled, etc. So I really don't know, like, now in the future, how these dots would, like, try to come together again, or like how. So yes, I'm in this luxurious position now this year to receive the grant, the stipendium, in COVID year. Like, so I got really very lucky. I mean, I don't know how to. It's kind of, like, you apply to many things and you never really imagine that anything would work out, and then suddenly you receive an email saying, "Oh, we are very happy to tell you that." No. So really, like, first I thought, "Oh, this is spam," like this is like a sophisticated spam, and then it took me a while to realize that no, it's yeah.
It sounds like the stipend has represented quite different things for the two of you. For Liwaa, it was a warm welcome. For you, it was possibly a spam email. But it's very, very exciting what the kind of sense of community and formation that you're describing. I think that means that there's a lot of potential for exciting things to happen in the future. So all three of you are going to read some recent work, some work that's connected to the city in some way. But I just want to ask one more question before that. But I also want to remind people watching that if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please put them in the chat, and we will try and put them to the panelists when we're done with the reading, if we have time. But my last question is, for there to be a community, for there to be a community of writers, a literary community, there needs to be readers. And I'm very interested to hear who you feel your readers are. Some of you, your work has been translated into German. Some of you, I mean, Sandra, you translate into German, but Haytham, your work has, barely been translated into German at all. So I think I'd like to start with Liwaa. Let's try and keep this one short so we have time for our readings. But tell me, who reads your work, and who do you want to read your work?
Of course, people in Syria. I mean, Arab readers, people who speak Arabic in Europe, or those who are interested in Arabic literature. I mean, having a play in the Royal Court, that means I had a different audience, a different kind of reader, let's say. But I mean, that kind of, in a way, I was putting my reading on a stage, and that gave a different access to my writing. But if I talk about the poetry, if I talk about other things, I would say that it's only among those who are interested in Arabic literature really went and purchased the book. So yeah, that's what I guess. I guess it's still focused on the Arabic readers, those who are in Syria or like in the Arab world, who are in Europe, and those who are like Sandra or other people like you. I mean, people who are interested in Arabic books. Of course, I came across like people who read me by chance, which is, I mean, from different languages who read me by chance. And this is really a very nice thing. And I got really excited that, I mean, not because they only have curiosity towards Syria and what's going on in Syria, because also Syria / war now is a different kind of platform, and people read you from that angle. And so it's also who read me and how they read me is now the question. I mean, so it's, I don't want to take all the time talking about this, but yeah, again, to the idea of representation, which Haytham was mentioning.
Yeah. Sandra, how about you? Who do you think is reading the translations that you're doing?
Oh, yeah. Well, it depends, of course, translations of what. But like, for instance, yeah, maybe what I'll read later from Rasha Abbas, and maybe also to mention something that was also a project dear to my heart, which was 2 books by Aboud Said. It was interesting because again, the thing that Haytham and now Liwaa also mentioned, representation. You know, there's like, if you see how media or even sometimes cultural stakeholders, especially in the right in 2015, 16, now it got, I feel it's a bit, they got relaxed. There was like a reflex to put these boxes, like, you know, to put these boxes to be filled in by the writers.
No, tell us what you mean by that in terms of subjects or in terms of genre, in terms of what?
That, you know, hashtag refugee, you know, and it's, yeah, I mean, of course, it's a complex issue, no? I mean, of course, it's something that it's right that people want to talk about it and that it needs to be talked about. And maybe also some writers want to talk about it, but maybe some writers don't want to talk about it. And it was very annoying. And it's even what I found annoying is that even with literature that, or with texts that that actually totally, I believe they totally escape that kind of reading because they have just nothing to do with it. They get pushed, as it happens, you know, with also other maybe Orientalist framings, they get pushed inside. And but then, like with, for instance, with these two writers that I mentioned, oftentimes the people who were expecting something because of those frames, they were very disappointed. And I sometimes, like, I don't know, I read comments on YouTube, but that's not a book where I learned something about refugees. It's really crazy, no?
Let's hope they learned something else.
Who were interested were rather, I don't know, arty people, like, for instance, the book we did, the first book we did, Abu Zaid, without our intention, became a punk song, became there were 4 theater productions that just happened, and where like crazy stuff has happened, where like one theater director somewhere in Germany in a big theater made a combination of a writer from the 16th, German writer of the 16th century from the 30-year war, and put it together with the text of Abu Zaid. So that kind of gave me satisfaction, because I thought, okay, but you know, some people, even very random people who are not interested necessarily in Arab literature, found something there. And the same with Rasha Abbas.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Haytham, how about you? Who reads your work and where are they?
You know, like listening to Liwaa and Sandra, you know, like it's really very complicated question. So, you know, like on one hand,
Hey, I didn't promise that being on this panel would be easier, Haytham. You have to work for your money.
So yes, like on one hand, you know, I'm writing in Arabic. Arabic literature is somehow the place where I think my texts belong to, and usually they are in conversation with other texts or other, you know, like the body of texts, or fighting with others' texts, or, you know, like whatever. So that's, you know, like the place where I imagine my texts are living in, you know, which means, okay, so somebody who speaks Arabic, or, you know, like who reads Arabic. Yet, on the other hand, I don't think that knowing the language is all the time enough to read the text. Rather, sometimes the real readers of the book or of the text comes in another historical moment, right? Like there is, what is really very nice about literature or writing, that the simultaneity is disturbed in many levels. You know, like the reader and the writer, they don't have really to share the same moment or the same place, even, you know,
like you reading Rilke when you arrived in Berlin.
Yeah. So I guess that, you know, like who could be the reader of texts which I'm reading, which I'm writing today? I guess it's not only people who would know the language or receive it translated, or like try to use it as anthropological whatever, like knowledge, but maybe also readers from another historical moment, which this specific historical moment opened something in the text which even the writer was not really aware of. And I guess that's that's the most exciting, I don't know, like surprises which might happen. And like it happens to all of us, that like you suddenly rediscover a book from, I don't know, 18th century or from the 8th century, and read things in it which nobody read it before or something. So yeah.
A community of readers unlimited by time or space. I like it. Okay, let's do some readings. All three of you are going to read a piece of work that's somehow in some way connected to this city. I'd like Sandra to start, please, and if you could just briefly tell us what the piece is and how it's connected for you, and then go ahead and read.
Yeah, I chose to read just two little bits out of a short story by Resha Abbas. The story is called تستطيع أن تدعني مخمل, and it's within the short story collection ملخص مجرى, which in English would be the gist of it. And I think, yeah, the story in English, it's not translated, but it would be called You Can Call Me Velvet. And it's connected to, I don't know, I mean, she has written that other book, Rasha has written that other short story collection called The Invention of German, which is very humorous. And there are many Berlin linked texts, but on a more obvious level. And I like this because it's maybe and maybe not on a more hidden level, because I feel that the how do you call it in English? The narrative, the narrating person seems to be on a transition to a place towards which she had expectations, a place full of freaks. And these things made me think that maybe it's Berlin, because you have many freaks in Berlin.
A very nice introduction.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll just read in German. So maybe the Arabic is somewhere, or
I think there will be links coming out in the chat to where you can get hold of other copies of this. And some Arabic as well, though, yeah.
Okay, so I'll start. It's not the beginning of the story, it's just in the middle of it. Mein Name ist unwichtig. Ich bin 27 Jahre alt. Wenn Sie mir eine Zigarette geben würden, wäre ich Ihnen dankbar. Wissen Sie, warum ich so bin? Der Unterschied zwischen mir und Ihnen ist, dass Sie im Gegensatz zu mir Wurzeln haben. Wurzeln, die tief in die Erde reichen. Deshalb wirken Sie so adrett und sauber. Deshalb ist Ihr Lächeln so schön. Und deswegen wirke ich so vertrauensunwürdig. Was uns zerbricht, das rettet uns. Das ist sowas wie ein Gesetz. Wenn ich als Jugendliche ausgeschimpft wurde, dann nannte man mich immer ein wurzelloses Teufelskraut. Das verletzte mich nicht, denn jene wütend dahingeworfene Beleidigung entsprach weitestgehend der Realität. Vielleicht habe ich sie auch einfach verinnerlicht. Ich pflegte mein Umfeld genau zu beobachten, auf der Suche nach der Ursache für mein So-Sein, so fernab jeder Vertrautheit, jeder tieferen Bindung, so fern von all dem Geplauder, Gezanke und Gelächter, das mich umgab und doch ausschloss. Die Wurzeln der anderen konnte ich genau sehen, etwa die sich in den häuslichen Spiegel geschlagen hatten, vor dem ein Mädchen stand und sich prüfend begutachtete, bevor sie aus dem Haus ging, nach draußen, wo in jedem Winkel ihre Verwandten und Brüder und Freunde auftauchen könnten und exakt wissen würden, was zu tun, was zu sagen war. Sie schienen darauf abgerichtet zu sein. Wie seltsam, abgerichtet auf Alltagsgespräche, Streitigkeiten und darauf, die richtigen Dinge einzukaufen. Vertrautheit schien durch ein unsichtbares, komplexes Geflecht aus miteinander verzweigten Kanälen zu plätschern. Ich fühlte mich nicht immer willkommen. obwohl ich mich daran erinnere, wie ich oftmals versuchte nachzuahmen, was ich um mich herum sah. Ich war gar nicht mal so schlecht darin. Aber jene Erde war nicht meine Erde. Es war unübersehbar. Sie spuckte mich aus. Ich wuchs nicht so wie meine wurzelbestückten Widersacher, die es schafften, mir alles, was ich begehrte, zu verderben. Es musste erst viel Zeit vergehen. Erst vor nicht allzu langer Zeit erfuhr ich, dass das, was uns zerbricht, uns rettet und dass ich meinen Trumpf in der Tasche habe, seit ich geboren bin. Und als ich sie so sah, wie sie starr in schmutziger Erde steckten, billige Elemente, da regte sich die Erde und stülpte sich nach innen. Aller Ruhm war nun dem Unkraut, das sich mühelos mit dem Wind vermehrte. Gelobt sei der Name des Herrn. Möge sein Wort auf die Erde niederkommen wie ein Schwerthieb. Der Ruhm gehörte fortan mir, meinem windigen, blauen Element und jenem zusätzlichen, hässlichen Auge, das sich mir auf der Brust geöffnet hatte und das man mir so lange zu zeigen verboten hatte, außer als Narbe. Das jüngste Gericht war gekommen. Die Erde gehörte mir. Vor einem Jahr bin ich hierher gekommen, in diese Stadt. Vor meiner Reise hatte ich geglaubt, dass ich mich hier endlich zu Hause fühlen würde unter all den Freaks, die es hier gibt. Ich dachte, hier würde ich mich nicht fremd fühlen wie in meiner Heimat. Doch es kam anders. Wissen Sie eigentlich, wie unmöglich es hier für mich ist, einen Job zu bekommen? Man findet mein Aussehen komisch. Die blauen Strähnen in meinem Haar, den fetten dunklen Lidstrich, die Silberringe in meiner Unterlippe und in meiner Augenbraue, meine mit Tätowierungen überzogenen Arme. Keiner möchte mich damit einstellen. Klar könnte ich mir fürs Vorstellungsgespräch einfach ordentliche Kleidung anziehen, meine Piercings abnehmen und meine Tattoos unter langen Ärmeln verstecken, aber das meine ich nicht. Dieses Erscheinungsbild ist doch dafür da, dass wir uns untereinander erkennen, dass wir erst gar niemandem vormachen, wir hätten so etwas wie Verantwortungsbewusstsein. Dass wir keine Mühe in den Umgang mit Leuten stecken, die uns ohnehin nicht akzeptieren würden. Wir sind wurzellos. Das ist es. Und einfach war es nie. Deswegen bin ich hier. Mir schon ganz kalt von dem ganzen Herumstehen hier auf der Straße und dem Sprechen mit Menschen, die es alle so unglaublich eilig haben. Mein Name ist unwichtig. Ich bin 30 Jahre alt. Sie können mich Samt nennen und dürfen mir gerne eine Zigarette anbieten. Ich rauche wahnsinnig gerne, habe aber nicht immer das nötige Geld, um mir Zigaretten zu kaufen. Wenn ich mir selbst welche drehe, fallen sie immer schon auseinander, bevor ich sie überhaupt anzünden kann. Oder das Blättchen brennt viel zu schnell ab. Keine Angst. Ich habe einen Schlafplatz bei Verwandten von mir, die auch hier in der Stadt wohnen. Aber ich fühle mich dort so fehl am Platz, weil es A, nicht mein Zuhause ist und ich B, keine Miete zahle. Deshalb ist es mir lieber, wenn meine Gastgeber mich tagsüber gar nicht erst zu Gesicht bekommen und ich dort erst aufkreuze, wenn sie bereits eingeschlafen sind. Jetzt ist es 11 Uhr. Dauert also nicht mehr lange, bis ich zurück in die Wohnung kann. Ich arbeite nicht als Prostituierte, wie Sie vermutlich angenommen haben. Ich mag es einfach nur, mich so anzuziehen. Ich liebe diese knappen, billigen Fetzen, das Vulgäre daran, das Künstliche. Wobei ich mich natürlich von Ihrer Frage, ob ich sexuelle Dienste anbiete, durchaus geschmeichelt fühle und Ihre Einsamkeit respektiere. Aber leider ist alles, was ich für Sie tun kann, Ihnen meine Geschichte zu erzählen und Ihnen so das Gefühl zu geben, etwas Außergewöhnliches erlebt zu haben. Im Gegenzug verlange ich nur, dass Sie mir eine Zigarette geben, die ich rauchen werde, bis der Bus kommt und ich zu meinem Schlafplatz fahren kann.
Thank you, Sandra. I can't say I'm in a position to evaluate that, but it sounded wonderful. Liwaa, I'd love you to go next, please. Please just tell us very briefly what the piece is, and then go ahead.
It's a piece from a long poem/text that I read, that I wrote, and I participated in a festival in Amsterdam. It's a dancing festival. It's called Dancing on the Edge. But why I chose this to be read today is that when I was kind of asked to write this, I was in a moment when I was thinking of my grandmother, and I was preparing for a trip to Syria back then. And I was in Berlin and I was writing and I was packing things, and I kind of was wondering whether to pack a black thing in case she passed away. I don't know, I was having this idea all the time, and I started thinking about, I mean, when you are in a trip, when you know that this, I mean, the idea of space and how the cities divide us, but still kind of, if I put this, do I really, I mean, what does that mean for me? I mean, I knew that she's ill, but I mean, she's not that ill, but being far away from her in a way made this kind of a question for me. And yeah, so it was in my background, and I kind of went into that trip, and that what happened. Actually, I arrived and she died. I mean, it wasn't that bad when I arrived. I don't know how it happened and she died. So in a way, there is a kind of, I mean, how we feel with others when we are in a different cities, and how we connect maybe more when we think really about them. I mean, in a way. So, but I wrote it while she was still alive, and I was like kind of thinking of her. So I'll read it in Arabic. It's called تفاح جدتي. Just a moment. تفاح جدتي. لا يمكن القول أنني متأكدة. كل ما هنالك أن غيماً أبيض كثيفاً عاد ليتراكب فوق رأسي. تماماً في ذلك الفراغ حيث يجب أن تتنفس الروح. أو في ذلك الثقب الذي يعض القلب. لست متأكدة. أقف أمام المرآة فلا أذكر سوى جدتي. اقتنعت لعقود أن تفاحها سيشمع بابها أمام المرض. جدتي التي تكورت في سرير منحوت في الحائط لم تترجل عنه منذ 9 شتاءات. تحركت ببطء نحو تلك الزاوية مع أول رصاصة أطلقت فوق رأسها. ثقبت غيمتها وبالت على نفسها. جدتي التي لم تسمح لي بالوقوف بملابس باهتة على الشرفة يوم العيد، التي لمعت صورتي حتى في مراهقتي، التي لم تترك أحداً دون أن تصفف شعرها، قداساً دون أن تنحني للكاهن لتبتسم ساخرة منه، عطلة دون أن تستقبل وتودع، يوماً دون أن تشعل القدور وتوبخ الذكور، ليلة دون مسلسل، ظهراً دون قيلولة، صباحاً دون تفاح. جدتي القاسية التي أحبتني صدفة دونا عن بقية الأحفاد، والتي لم تحب الشفقة، بالت على نفسها مع أول رصاصة. ثقبت غيمتها فأمطرت جدتي، ومنذ ذلك الحين تماهى سريرها مع الحائط، وهي مع السرير كوسادة مجعدة. استقالت من السخرية اللاذعة، وحتى التفاح تركت عليه دكة أسنانها ونامت. قالت: عندما تنتهي الحرب أوقظوني لأتابع الحلقة الأخيرة. وأنا الآن أقف أمام المرآة أفكر في تفاحها، في الغيمة والثقوب. الثقوب التي ولدت من رحم البيوت الواقفة على رجليها رغم أن قلبها تحطم. ثقوب شقت داخلها سراً بسكاكين المطابخ كي يمر الرجال والنساء عبرها في جنازات مؤجلة وقت الحرب، يحمسون صلواتهم كأنهم توابيت مع وقف التنفيذ. ثقوب يأتي منها الضوء والهواء والزاد والخطر والخيانة. منخورة تفاحة هذه الحقبة. كلما أغمضت عيني سمعت صوتاً يقول: إنها حياة مستعملة، جسد مستعمل مراراً وتكراراً. أراني في مرآة صغيرة مكسورة معلقة على الحائط، ومعالم وجهي غير مكتملة. لا طريقة لأرى وجهي كاملاً فأميزني. أخذت الحرب كل من أعرفهم ومن عرفوني. من سيكمل لي وجهي إذا قضمت مرآة الحياة نصفه كتفاحة؟ أيقظوا جدتي. خلصت.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Liwaa. Our last reading Haytham is going to read something from his most recent collection in Arabic, ما لا يمكن إصلاحه, which is a book I love and a book I'm translating. So he's going to be reading a paragraph from a story called Miyah Gawfiya, which I translated. And I feel, because we don't have very much time left, and I do want to ask a couple of audience questions, I think it's hopefully quite clear what the connection of this is with Berlin. So perhaps I'll ask you to just go straight ahead and read it, if that's all right with you, Haytham.
Sure.
Thank you.
So yes, so I'll just jump in and read this paragraph. We arrived in Dahlem in winter. The first few times we went out to explore the place, we discovered that it bordered a forest called the Green Wood. So we went to visit it and saw oak trees for the first time, tall and stripped bare of their leaves and cloaked in a dusting of snow. We walked through the trees in a trance until we reached a small concealed lake. People were walking around it in the snow with their children and their dogs. But there was something strange about the scene. All movement was slowed by the snow, and in the same way, all sound seemed to be coming from far away, as if it had to pass through thick layers of cotton. Every so often, the sounds would disappear entirely to be replaced by a thick silence over the lake, a silence unlike any I had ever heard. The surface of the lake was frozen and smooth, and no one was walking on it. We saw signs around the lake warning, in many languages, against walking on the ice in winter, because the lake was deep and the lower layers of water remained liquid, and the frozen surface could be weak in places and might crack, sending whoever was walking on it into the water below. The signs described falling in as fatal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I love that scene. Thank you so much. Okay, we're just going to have time for one question each, basically, but we've had some really, really interesting questions from the audience. So I will put one to you first, Haytham. So this is, because you've been living in Germany for such a long time, were you never tempted to write in German? And how does it feel to live in one city or language and continue writing in another?
Good question. Where to start? I mean, of course, it's a schizophrenic Dasein, or like schizophrenic kind of living between two languages. And it had, like its kind of dark moments, but sometimes it had also its kind of intriguing moments. Why I didn't write in German? Well, first because it's not easy. But also, like, as I was saying, like, this is really my the ecosystem which, like, I imagine my texts or what I'm doing is living in is really this ecosystem called Arabic literature. I really don't know also what does it mean, Arabic literature, but it's often the texts are in, like in conversation with other texts. But, like, saying all of this, living in a city like Berlin, you learn a lot about history. And you learn also a lot about the undeadness of certain monsters, like undeadness of fascism, undeadness of racism, undeadness of colonialism, or, like settler colonialism. And, like the recent history, what happened in the last 10 years, it's somehow, like, and of course, like the deadlocks of many of the protests and revolutions, etc. It's sometimes you know, like helpful to, you know, like to work on a certain deadlock. I don't know, like to learn about this undeadness and to try to work on a certain deadlock which the present moment has. This has nothing to do with, you know, like Arabic language or German language, but maybe it has to do with, you know, like how to live in a certain historical moment, maybe, you know. I don't know if this answers anything.
Like all the best answers, it raises more questions than it answers, I think. The next one is for you, Sandra. And it is, what were the major emerging characteristics in the writing, the Arabic writing that applied for the stipend? I'm sure that the writing was varied, but did you notice any certain aesthetics?
Certain aesthetics. Well, if I can talk about a tendency, which for sure has to do also with the nationalities applying, or nationalities of the people applying, is maybe reconnects to what Haytham said before, in the sense that, yeah, maybe if there was a number of people who did something in terms of topics in a similar direction, then it was people who tried to write in different styles about trauma, maybe. Yes. Yeah. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
While what's maybe, no, mate, that's not the question. No, let's leave it with that.
Short but sweet. Thank you. And Liwaa, the last question is for you. How has the German audience responded to your poetry versus your theatre writing? And does that affect where you invest your time and what you're interested in writing?
I mean, no, the audience, I mean, of course, I'm glad. I mean, when it comes to, I mean, to relating to the audience, but when I have an idea, I just have an idea. I mean, regardless to, I mean, who likes what, and if the audience like my plays more than my poetry. I didn't have my play presented in German yet. I mean, it was translated. We're talking about goats here. It is translated, but then COVID took the stage for everyone. So it was, I mean, it was at the pipeline to be kind of introduced to theaters. But then, I mean, we all just watched one thing from home, which is, I mean, the statistics of COVID stuff. So I don't know how would be the reception. I'm so curious. I mean, honestly, I'm so curious. I'm so intrigued. I'm waiting for that moment to see how, I mean, how this could be read. And this is something that I would like also to see what kind of similarities between a totalitarian plot in Goats and, I mean, what Haytham mentioned also about the historical moment in German scene. So I mean, kind of refreshing that kind of media black out and stuff. So I'm curious. My poetry also was not translated into German. It was translated into English. So I mean, yeah, I'm.
Sandra,
yeah,
we hope you're listening to this.
yeah. So yeah, I'm waiting for that.
Well, thank you so much. And, you know, despite being a slight hurry in the last few minutes, we have actually managed to finish almost on time. So all that remains to be said is thank you very much once again to all three of you, Sandra, Liwaa, Haytham, and
Thank
to
you.
Marsha and Sawad again for organising this. And thank you to everybody for coming. See you
Thank
at the
you.
next panels, I hope.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.